The Bartender's Dilemma, a sci-fi tale of parallel realities. Jake wiped down the bar counter for the 1000th time, his movements mechanical, his mind elsewhere. At 50, he should have been content with his life, a steady job, a roof over his head, and enough to get by. But something gnawed at him, a persistent feeling that this wasn't how things were supposed to be. It started with little things, misplaced memories, déjà vu that felt too real, dreams that left him gasping for air and reaching for something just beyond his grasp. Then came the whispers, hushed conversations in dark corners of the bar about CERN, parallel universes, and a world that was better. Jake dismissed it all as the ramblings of conspiracy theorists and drunks. Until the night everything changed. A group of 5 walked into his bar, eyes starting nervously, voices low. They huddled in a booth, laptops and strange devices spread out before them. Jake couldn't help but eavesdrop as he brought their drinks. "We've found the frequency," a woman with wild red hair whispered. "The World Wide Web, it's not just a network, it's a bridge between realities." Jake's hand trembled, spilling a drop of beer. The group fell silent, eyeing him suspiciously. "You feel it too, don't you?" A man with kind eyes and a salt and pepper beard asked. "The wrongness of this world?" Jake nodded, words failing him. And just like that, he was initiated into the Renegades. Over the next 2 weeks, Jake learned the truth. In December 2012, CERN's experiments had inadvertently created a parallel probability, a simulated reality that diverged from the true timeline. The Mandela effect wasn't just false memories. It was the bleed-through of the original reality. "But why me?" Jake asked one night, as the group huddled over their equipment in his closed bar. "I'm just a bartender." The red-haired woman, Zoe, smiled sadly. "In the original timeline, Jake, you were extraordinary. A nexus of magical energy, a focal point for joy and connection. Your bar wasn't just a place to drink. It was a sanctuary of wonder." Jake's head spun. Flashes of memory assaulted him, laughter echoing off walls covered in shifting murals, drinks that sparked and fizzed with impossible colors, patrons levitating in fits of glee. He remembered the warmth of magic flowing through his veins, the ability to grant small miracles with a wink and a smile. "We need to get back," Jake whispered, a tear rolling down his cheek. "This world. It's wrong. It's empty." The Renegades nodded grimly. They'd been working tirelessly, using the strange consistencies of the World Wide Web to establish contact with their counterparts in the original reality. It was dangerous work. Governments and shadowy organizations hunted them, desperate to maintain the illusion of this simulated world. As weeks turned to months, Jake threw himself into the work. His bar became their base of operations, the taps and bottles mere cover for the array of quantum computers and reality-bending devices hidden in the basement. He learned to code, to manipulate the fabric of their false reality, all while the ache for his true self grew stronger. Then came the breakthrough. A message, garbled but unmistakable, from the other side. "We see you. Hold on. The way home is opening." Joy and terror warred within Jake. Home, his real home, was within reach. But a new fear gripped him. What of his counterpart in the true reality? The Jake who had lived these 12 years in the world of magic and wonder? Did he deserve to be raced for this pale invitation to return? The night of the attempted crossing came. The Renegades gathered in Jake's bar, equipment humming with unearthly energy. As Zoe initiated the sequence to tear open the veil between worlds, Jake's hands shook. A shimmering portal materialized in the center of the room. Through it, Jake could see himself. Older, yes, but with eyes that sparkled with the magic he'd lost. The other Jake's expression mirrored his own, wonder, fear, recognition. "I'm sorry," Jake whispered to his counterpart. "I don't know if I have the right." The other Jake smiled, a sad understanding in his eyes. He reached out, his hand passing through the portal. "We're both real," his voice echoed, as if from a great distance. "Two sides of the same coin. Perhaps there's a way for both to exist." As their fingers touched, a surge of energy coursed through Jake. Memories flooded in, not just of the life he'd lost, but of the one he'd lived in this simulated world. The joys, the sorrows, the quiet moments of beauty even in a reality devoid of magic. The portal pulsed, growing unstable. Zoe shouted a warning, but Jake couldn't move, transfixed by the connection with his other self. Together, the other Jake said, gripping tightly. "We bridge the gap. We heal the fracture." With a blinding flash and a thunderous crack, the portal collapsed. Jake found himself on the floor of his bar, gasping for breath. The renegades crowded around him, concern etched on their faces. "Did it work?" Zoe asked, helping him to his feet. "Are you? You?" Jake looked at his hands, feeling the familiar tingle of magic beneath his skin. But there was something else too, a grounded wisdom, an appreciation for the mundane he'd never had before. "I'm both," he said softly. "We found a way." As he spoke, the world around them began to shimmer and change. The drab walls of the bar came alive with swirling patterns. Bottles clinked and fizzed with impossible concoctions. Outside, they could hear shouts of wonder and confusion as magic seeped back into a world that had forgotten it. Jake smiled, pouring drinks for his friends, his co-conspirators and healing reality itself. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. "And to the power of both the extraordinary and the everyday." As they toasted, Jake felt a warmth spread through him. The World Wide Web hummed with new energy, a true bridge between realities now. Somewhere out there, countless other Jakes were waking up to a world transformed, each carrying a piece of the whole. The work wasn't done, there would be chaos and wonder as the worlds reintegrated. But for now, in this moment, Jake was content. He was home, in all the complex, beautiful ways that word could mean. Chapter 2, Ripples in Reality. The days following the merger of realities were a whirlwind of chaos and wonder. Jake's bar became a nexus point, a place where those awakening to the new reality could gather and make sense of the changes. Patrons would stumble in, eyes wide with confusion, only to gasp in amazement as their drinks changed color with their moods, or as the jukebox played the songs of their hearts rather than the ones they'd selected. Jake found himself not just a bartender, but a guide and counselor to a world relearning magic. Zoe and the other renegades set up a command center in the basement, monitoring the worldwide effects of the merge. Reports flooded in from across the globe, spontaneous carnivals erupting in once drab city centers, long-extinct animals appearing in zoos overnight, and people discovering latent magical abilities they'd only dreamed of. But with wonder came complications. Government scrambled to maintain order in a world where the laws of physics had become more like polite suggestions. Corporate empires built on technology found themselves competing with mom-and-pop shops offering enchanted alternatives. Jake's own challenges were more personal. He grappled with dual sets of memories, reconciling the life of mundane struggle he'd lived in the simulation with the magical existence he'd known before. Some nights, he'd wake in a cold sweat, unsure of which reality he truly belonged to. It was on one such night, as Jake sat alone at his bar long after closing, that he received an unexpected visitor. A shimmering portal opened in the middle of the room, and through it stepped himself. But not the other Jake he'd merged with. This was a third version, eyes haunted, clothes tattered. "You did it," the new Jake said, his voice rough with emotion. "You actually found a way to merge the realities." Jake stood, cautious but curious. "Who are you? Where did you come from?" The newcomer laughed bitterly. "I'm you. Or rather, I'm the you from a timeline where we failed. Where the attempt to cross over destroyed both realities." A chill ran down Jake's spine. "How is that possible? How are you here?" "The World Wide Web," the other Jake explained, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "It really does connect all possible realities. In my world, only a handful of us survived the collapse. We've been jumping from timeline to timeline, searching for one where we succeeded." Jake's mind reeled. He poured 2 drinks, sliding one to his alternate self. "So what now? Are you here to stay?" The other Jake shook his head. "Can't. This reality is stable, but it's not mine. I can only observe, learn, and move on. But Jake, you need to know. What you've done here, it's bigger than you realize. The merging of magic and mundane, it's not just about this world. It's a cascade effect." As they talked deep into the night, Jake learned of other realities, some where magic dominated completely, others where it had been stamped out entirely. His actions, the perfect balance he'd struck, were sending ripples across the multiverse. "Your nexus point," the other Jake explained. "Not just in this reality, but across all of them. The choices you make, the way you help this world adapt, it will echo across countless universes." As dawn broke, the alternate Jake prepared to leave. "I have to keep searching," he said. "For the others like me, lost between worlds. But Jake, use your power wisely. You're not just a bartender anymore. You're a guardian of realities. With a final nod, the other Jake stepped back through his portal, leaving Jake alone with his thoughts and the weight of multiversal responsibility. As he began to set up the bar for another day of magical mixology and interdimensional counseling, Jake couldn't help but smile. Life had become infinitely more complicated, but also infinitely more wondrous. He pulled out his phone, marveling at how the World Wide Web now shimmered with ethereal energy. A message from Zoe popped up: emergency meeting. New development in the southern hemisphere. Magic levels spiking. Jake sighed, pocketing the phone. The work of balancing realities was never done. But first, he had drinks to pour on the world to reassure. After all, that's what bartenders do, in this reality, and every other. Chapter 3, The Equilibrium Seekers. Jake arrived at the Renegade's makeshift command center, his mind still reeling from the encounter with his alternate self. The basement hummed with an otherworldly energy, screens flickering with data streams that seemed to defy conventional physics. Zoe looked up from a holographic map, her face etched with concern. "Glad you're here, Jake. We've got a situation." The map zoomed in on the southern coast of Chile. A swirling vortex of magical energy pulsed ominously, spreading outward with each passing second. "It started about 3 hours ago," Zoe explained. "At first, we thought it was just another hotspot of reality integration, but..." She trailed off, zooming in further. Jake's breath caught in his throat. At the center of the vortex, barely visible through the maelstrom of energy, stood a figure. No, not one figure, many, overlapping and shifting, as if multiple versions of the same person were trying to occupy the same space. "Is that?" Jake began, unable to finish the thought. Zoe nodded grimly. "We think so. It's you. Or rather, many versions of you from across the multiverse. They're trying to force their way into our reality." Jake slumped into a chair, the weight of multiversal responsibility suddenly feeling very real. "My other self warned me about this. He said I was a nexus point across realities." The room fell silent as the implication sank in. Finally, a newer member of the Renegades, a quantum physicist named Dr. Ilara Chen, spoke up. "This could destabilize everything we've achieved. If too many versions of a nexus being like yourself converge in one reality, it could cause a cascading collapse across the multiverse." Jake ran a hand through his hair, feeling the conflicting memories of a magical past and a mundane present swirling in his mind. "So what do we do?" Zoe's eyes gleamed with determination. "We go to Chile. We find a way to communicate with these other Jakes and convince them to return to their own realities." "And if we can't?" Jake asked, already knowing the answer. "Then we find a way to force them back," Dr. Chen said softly. "For the sake of all realities." Within hours, the core team of Renegades was aboard a hastily chartered flight to Chile. Jake spent the journey in deep thought, trying to center himself and draw upon both the magical knowledge of his original self and the grounded perspective of his simulated life. As they approached the vortex site, the world around them began to warp and shift. Trees twisted into impossible shapes, their leaves shimmering with otherworldly light. The ground beneath their feet seemed to pulse with barely contained energy. At the eye of the storm, Jake came face to face with a dozen versions of himself. Some crackled with raw magical power, while others clutched advanced technological devices. All wore expressions of desperation and hope. "Brothers," Jake called out, his voice carrying an authority he didn't quite feel. "We need to talk." What followed was the strangest negotiation of Jake's life, or lives. Each version of himself represented a reality with its own unique balance of magic and technology, its own triumphs and tragedies. Some sought to escape dying worlds, others to conquer new ones, and a few simply wanted to find the home that felt right. As Jake listened to their stories, he felt a plan forming. "We don't need to fight," he said finally. "And we don't need to destroy each other's realities. What we need is balance." Over the next hours, as the vortex pulsed and reality itself seemed to hold its breath, Jake proposed a solution. A network of communication and limited travel between realities, regulated to maintain the stability of each world. The Jakes would become guardians and mediators, using their unique position as nexus beings to guide the flow of knowledge and resources across the multiverse. "We call ourselves the Equilibrium Seekers," Jake announced, feeling the weight of infinite possibilities settling on his shoulders. Our mission is to maintain the delicate balance between all realities, ensuring that no world falls too far into chaos or stagnation. As the other Jakes nodded in agreement, the vortex began to stabilize. One by one, they returned to their own realities, but not before establishing a connection through the enhanced World Wide Web, a truly universal network spanning all of existence. Jake watched as the last of his alternates disappeared, leaving behind a shimmering portal no larger than a coin. He pocketed it, knowing it represented both a great responsibility and an incredible opportunity. Zoe approached, her eyes wide with awe. "So, what now? Are you still our bartender, or have you become something more?" Jake smiled, feeling the familiar warmth of his bar calling to him across the miles. "I'm still me, Zoe. Just with a few extra jobs on the side. Come on, let's go home. I have a feeling the multiverse can use a drink." As they turned to leave, Jake couldn't help but marvel at the twists his life had taken. From a simple bartender in a mundane world to a guardian of multiversal equilibrium, all because he dared to remember a life filled with magic. The work ahead would be challenging, but Jake felt ready. After all, whether mixing drinks or balancing realities, it all came down to finding the right blend. And that was something Jake had always been good at, in any reality. Chapter 4, The Multiversal Mixologist. Weeks had passed since the formation of the Equilibrium Seekers, and Jake found himself settling into a routine that was anything but routine. By day, he tended his bar, which had become a hotspot for both magical and mundane patrons seeking to understand the new blended reality. By night, he delved into his duties as a multiversal mediator, using the pocket portal to communicate with his alternate selves across realities. It was during one such late-night session that Jake received an urgent message through the enhanced World Wide Web. A reality designated Earth 217 was experiencing a critical imbalance. Magic was overflowing, threatening to tear apart the fabric of that world. Jake sighed, pocketing the communication device that looked suspiciously like a cocktail shaker. "Zoe," he called to his second-in-command, who was reviewing data at a nearby table. "I need to make a house call. Mind watching the bar?" Zoe nodded, a mixture of concern and excitement in her eyes. "Be careful out there. The multiverse is still adjusting to our meddling." With a wry smile, Jake activated the pocket portal. The air shimmered and split, revealing a swirling vortex of energy. Taking a deep breath, he stepped through. The transition was disorienting, like being pulled through a kaleidoscope made of memories and possibilities. When Jake's vision cleared, he found himself in a version of his bar that was both familiar and alien. The walls polished with living murals, scenes shifting and changing with each passing moment. Patrons floated lazily near the ceiling, sipping drinks that defied gravity and logic. At the center of it all stood another Jake, looking frazzled and overwhelmed. "Thank the cosmic bartender, you're here, Earth 217," Jake said, relief evident in his voice. "I can't keep up with the demands of this reality. The magic. It's too much." Jake surveyed the scene, his mind already working on the problem. "I see what you mean. The balance is off. Too much wonder, not enough mundane to ground it." Over the next few hours, Jake worked side by side with his alternate self, using both his magical knowledge and his practical bartending skills to bring harmony back to this overly enchanted establishment. He introduced simple, non-magical drinks alongside the floating cocktails. He adjusted the living murals to include scenes of everyday life. Most importantly, he taught his counterpart the art of listening, to truly hear the needs of patrons, magical or otherwise. As the night wore on, the frantic energy of the bar began to settle. Patrons found their feet back on the ground, engaged in a mix of fantastical and mundane conversations. The magic hadn't disappeared, but it had found a more sustainable rhythm. "I think I understand now, Earth 217," Jake said as they shared a quiet drink at the bar. "It's not about suppressing the magic or letting it run wild. It's about finding the right blend, just like mixing the perfect cocktail." Jake nodded, feeling a sense of satisfaction. "Exactly. And that blend will be different for each reality. The key is to stay adaptable, to listen to the needs of your world and adjust accordingly." As he prepared to return to his own reality, Jake was struck by a realization. His role as an equilibrium seeker wasn't so different from his job as a bartender. Both required a keen understanding of balance, the ability to listen without judgment, and the skill to mix disparate elements into a harmonious whole. Back in his own bar, Jake found Zoe waiting with an expectant look. "How'd it go?" she asked. Jake smiled, reaching for a bottle and 2 glasses. It was educational. I think I'm starting to understand my role in all this. He poured 2 fingers of a shimmering liquid that seemed to change color as it caught the light. I'm not just balancing realities. I'm mixing them, finding the right blend of magic and mundane to keep the multiverse flowing smoothly. Zoe raised an eyebrow as she accepted the glass. The multiversal mixologist, eh? Something like that, Jake chuckled. They clinked glasses, the sound resonating with a hint of otherworldly harmony. As they sipped their drinks, Jake's mind wandered to the infinite realities out there, each with its own unique flavor of existence. He knew the work ahead would be challenging, full of unforeseen complications and delicate balancing acts. But for the first time since this wild journey began, Jake felt truly at peace with his place in the grand cosmic bar. Whether serving drinks or saving realities, he was doing what he did best, bringing people together and making their worlds a little bit brighter, one perfectly mixed moment at a time. The pocket portal hummed softly in his pocket, a reminder of the vast multiverse waiting beyond. But for now, Jake was content to be here, in this moment, in this reality. After all, every great adventure needs a place to call home, and for Jake, that would always be behind the bar, ready to serve whatever the multiverse might order next. Chapter 5, The Void in the Glass. Jake's reputation as the multiversal mixologist had spread far beyond his own reality. Equilibrium seekers from across the multiverse sought his advice, and his bar had become a neutral ground for interdimensional diplomacy. But with great power came great responsibility, and Jake was about to face his greatest challenge yet. It started with a drink, a simple glass of water that refused to be anything but empty. No matter how many times Jake filled it, the liquid would vanish the moment it touched the glass. At first, he dismissed it as a magical prank, but as the phenomenon spread to other glasses and liquids, he realized something was terribly wrong. "Zoe," Jake called, his voice tense. "We've got a problem." Zoe rushed over, her eyes widening as she watched Jake futilely attempt to fill the glass. "What is this? Some kind of localized antimatter effect?" Jake shook his head. "It's worse. I think reality itself is developing holes." As if to confirm his fears, a patron at the far end of the bar suddenly flickered out of existence, leaving behind nothing but a faint outline of displaced air. Panic began to spread through the establishment. "Everyone stay calm," Jake shouted, his voice carrying an authority that surprised even him. "Zoe, initiate emergency protocol Omega. We need to contact the other equilibrium seekers immediately." Within hours, Jake's bar had transformed into a multiversal war room. Holographic projections of his alternate selves flickered around the room, each reporting similar phenomena in their own realities. Holes in the fabric of existence, growing larger and more numerous by the hour. Dr. Elara Chen, who had been monitoring the situation from her quantum lab, delivered the grim news. "It's a cascading ontological decay," she explained, her voice grave. "The merging of realities has created instabilities at the quantum level. Reality itself is unraveling." Jake felt the weight of countless worlds settling on his shoulders. "There has to be a way to stop it," he insisted. It was Earth 217 Jake who offered a glimmer of hope. "What if we approach this like we do our cocktails?" he suggested. "When a mix is unstable, sometimes you need to add a stabilizing agent." Jake's eyes lit up with understanding. "A cosmic binder," he mused. "Something to hold reality together at its most fundamental level." The next few days were a blur of interdimensional research, quantum experiments, and metaphysical bartending. Jake and his team worked tirelessly, combining cutting-edge science with esoteric magical knowledge from across the multiverse. The solution, when it finally came, was both elegantly simple and mind-bogglingly complex. A cosmic cocktail, mixed at the quantum level, infused with the essence of stable realities and a dash of pure possibility. "It's ready," Jake announced, holding up a shimmering vial of liquid that seemed to contain galaxies. "But administering it will be dangerous. We'll need to access the quantum foam at the heart of the multiverse." Zoe stepped forward, determination in her eyes. "I'll go with you," she said. "You'll need someone to watch your back in case things go sideways." Jake nodded gratefully. With a final look at his team, he activated the pocket portal, calibrating it to take them deeper into the multiverse than anyone had ever gone before. The journey was harrowing. Reality broke down around them, fragmenting into shards of possibility. Jake and Zoe clung to each other, their very existence threatened by the swirling chaos of unraveling timelines. At the heart of it all, they found the source, a swirling maelstrom of pure potentiality, the quantum foam from which all realities were born. And at its center, a void that threatened to consume everything. Now or never, Jake shouted over the roar of creation and destruction. With a practiced motion, he uncorked the vial and poured its contents into the void. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a flash that outshone the birth of universes, the cosmic cocktail took effect. Reality itself shuddered, recalibrated, and began to restabilize. Jake and Zoe found themselves back in the bar, sprawled on the floor amidst overturned chairs and broken glasses. But the holes were gone, and the fabric of existence felt whole once more. As they picked themselves up, a cheer went up from the assembled equilibrium seekers. Realities across the multiverse reported the same. The crisis had been averted. In the aftermath, as the bar slowly returned to its new version of normal, Jake stood behind the counter, absently polishing a glass. The experience had changed him, given him a glimpse of the true vastness and fragility of existence. "You know," he said to Zoe, who was nursing a well-deserved drink, "I used to think being a bartender was just about serving drinks and listening to people's troubles. Now I realize it's about so much more. It's about creating a space where different elements can come together in harmony, where balance can be maintained in the face of chaos." Zoe raised her glass in a toast. "To the multiversal mixologist," she said with a grin. "Guardian of realities, pourer of drinks, and now, saver of the entire damn multiverse." Jake chuckled, clinking his glass against hers. As he looked around the bar, at the mix of magical and mundane patrons from across realities, he felt a profound sense of purpose. The work of maintaining balance would never be done, but he was ready for whatever the multiverse might pour into his glass next. After all, in the grand cosmic bar of existence, last call was still a long way off. This document created by Kenneth/Achille. Please report any violations of the terms of use including copyright and other violations to support@bugolabs.com.